The emergency room had a way of making time behave strangely. Everything was bright and quiet at the same time. Machines hummed, nurses spoke softly to people who looked like they hadn't expected their day to end under fluorescent lights. My hands were still shaking when they finally handed me my phone back. The officer who had taken the accident report earlier had placed it on the tray beside the bed after they finished examining me. The airbag burn on my arm throbbed in a dull, steady rhythm. My shoulder felt like someone had poured concrete into it. The doctor said concussion symptoms were likely. They wanted someone to drive me home. I already knew who that someone would have to be. I called my dad. The phone rang longer than I expected. Long enough that I pictured him looking at the screen before answering. Eventually, the call stopped. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text. "I'm at lunch with your stepmom. Can't just leave." For a moment, I stared at the message like it belonged to someone else, not angry, just trying to translate it. Then I typed the easiest word available. Okay, that word had been useful most of my life. Okay meant I wasn't difficult. Okay meant he didn't have to feel bad. Okay meant things could continue smoothly. I set the phone down. A nurse came by with paperwork and smiled the kind of smile people use when they assume someone is coming soon. "Your ride on the way?" I nodded. "Yeah." She didn't ask any more questions. After a while, they moved me to a chair in the discharge area. People came and went. A kid with a broken wrist. An older woman who looked exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with injury. The adrenaline from the crash started draining out of my body. That was when the pain settled in. Not dramatic pain, just a steady ache spreading across my ribs and shoulder. My head felt thick and slow. I checked my phone again. No new messages. I thought about texting him that maybe it was more serious than he thought. That the car had spun and hit the guardrail hard enough to bend the hood. But the word okay had already closed the door on that. Across the room, the same police officer who had been at the crash site was standing near the nurse's station finishing something on a tablet. He had seen the front of my car, the crumpled metal, the way my hands wouldn't stop shaking when I climbed out. A nurse eventually came back and noticed I was still sitting there. "You still waiting on someone?" I hesitated. "Yeah." She nodded, but a few minutes later I saw her talking quietly with the officer. He walked over, not hurried, not concerned in an obvious way, just someone finishing the last part of a job. "You holding up all right?" he asked. "Yeah." He looked at the empty chair beside me. "Your ride running late?" I tried to keep it casual. "My dad's coming." He nodded. "When?" I glanced at the phone again. "Soon, I think." The officer didn't say anything for a moment. His eyes drifted to the accident report on his tablet. Then he asked a quieter question. "Did he know you were in a collision?" "Yeah." Another pause. Then I added something without really meaning to. "He's just busy." The officer nodded slowly. Busy was a word he had probably heard a lot. He looked back down at the report. "That your emergency contact listed here." "Yeah." He tapped the screen once, thinking. "Well," he said almost casually, "I can let him know the situation more clearly if you want. Sometimes the details help." I shrugged. "Sure." I didn't think much about it after that. Across town, my dad was halfway through lunch. It was one of those places with big windows and soft music, playing low enough that conversations felt private. My stepmom was telling a story about someone at work. My dad checked his phone once. Saw my okay. That word did what it always did. It reassured him. If it were serious, I would have said something else, right? Dessert menus arrived. He was deciding between cheesecake and something with chocolate when the restaurant door opened and a police officer stepped inside. Uniforms have a gravity to them. Conversations nearby slowed without anyone fully realizing it. The officer spoke to the host, glanced around the dining room, then started walking between tables. When he reached their table, he stopped. "Mr. Carter?" My dad looked up. "Yes?" The officer's voice stayed calm, professional. "Sorry to interrupt your lunch." My stepmom straightened in her chair. My dad felt something cold slip into his stomach. "Is something wrong?" The officer glanced briefly at the tablet in his hand. "I just wanted to confirm something. Your child was involved in a traffic collision earlier today." My dad nodded quickly. "Yes, they texted me." They said they were okay. They are stable, the officer said. The room felt very quiet suddenly. They were discharged from the emergency department about 40 minutes ago. My dad blinked. Oh. The officer continued, his tone neutral. They're currently waiting alone for transportation. My stepmom looked at my dad. The officer finished the sentence gently. We understood you were unable to come because of lunch. He didn't say it accusingly, just clearly, like reading a fact from a report. The words settled on the table between them. Around them, forks scraped plates, glasses clinked. A few nearby diners tried very hard not to look. My dad opened his mouth, closed it again. For the first time since receiving my message, he heard what his decision actually sounded like. The officer nodded once. If you're unable to assist, the hospital can arrange transportation. I just wanted to make sure the family contact understood the situation. Then he stepped away. Lunch was still sitting on the table. But it looked different now. My dad pushed his chair back quickly. I need to go. By the time he arrived at the hospital parking lot, I was already gone. Hospital policy had taken over after another hour of waiting. They ordered a rideshare through a discharge program. The nurse walked me outside and helped me into the car. When my phone buzzed again, I didn't read it right away. The city passed by slowly through the window. Later that night, I finally opened the message. It was long. Apologies. Explanations, regret. I read the whole thing. Then I turned the phone over on the table. Not angry. Just aware of something that had shifted quietly into place. For years I had been careful not to ask for too much, careful to make things easy. But that afternoon had changed something simple. The next time something went wrong, I already knew what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't start by calling him. Weeks later, I drove past the restaurant where the officer had walked in that day. It looked completely ordinary, people eating lunch, talking, laughing. For a long time, I thought the worst part of the accident was the sound the car made when it hit the guardrail. But it wasn't. It was learning how easy it had been for my dad to stay seated.